Disclaimer, not disclaimer. This teaching is not intended to replace studying the Torah on Shabbat. Rather, it is an extension of Torah study to learn from the sins of our forebears in the ancient past so we will understand the Torah's practical application in our own lives today. We will also regain our national identity, which is so greatly missing among us. Our true identity is not the nation of our biological birth, but with biblical Israel. And the patriotism for biblical Israel, which we so badly need, can be gained by identifying with the people and history of those ancient times. Always study the Torah of Yahweh, which is His instructions, teachings, and His law, rolled into one word, Torah. Not only on Shabbat, but every day we should meditate on His Torah, His law. Psalms 119, 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. Deuteronomy 5:33. You shall walk in all the ways which Yahweh your God has commanded you, that you may live, and that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. Psalms 1:1 and 1:2. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand on the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in Yahweh's law, His Torah. On His law, His Torah, he meditates day and night. Psalms 119, 174. I have longed for your salvation, Yahweh. Your law, your Torah, is my delight. This is the teaching called Samson and the Roaring Lion. And of course, this is a continuation of the teaching from last week in Judges 14. And in this chapter, the life of Samson will continue as in the messianic theme which I have laid out. And simultaneously it will symbolize the defiled state of Israel before Yahweh. And so before we get started, let's say a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for all the wisdom that you and understanding that you give us, and I pray that your words will come forth and blossom and bud, and that on your words you will build and restore your kingdom. But anything that comes just from me or my opinion, I pray that it will not live, that it will fall to the ground and die, and that everyone will be edified and will understand some new things that you want them to understand. And I pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, so Judges 14:8 says, after a while he, that's Samson, returned to take her, that's the woman from Timnah in the world. So Samson went to visit his betrothed in Timnah. He wasn't yet married to her, he was betrothed to her. And he went to tell her family it was time for their marriage to commence. And so he went down there to make that arrangement. And the verse then further says, and he went over to see the carcass of the lion. So apparently he was by himself for this trip, but we're going to see also that his father went with him, but they must have traveled separately. But on his way back to Mahane Dan, he deliberately turned aside from the main highway to see the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion, and honey. And so Judges 14:9 tells us he took it, the honey, into his hands and went on eating as he went. Now, Samson has touched a dead body at this point, which is regarded as him breaking his Nazirite vow. So let's look again at the Nazirite vow and see if we can determine whether this is true. In order to find out, we will look at two other classes of people who are not permitted to touch dead bodies, and these are the regular priests and the high priest. The regular priests have the least restrictions. The Nazirite has the next level of restriction, and the high priest has the highest level of restriction regarding touching dead bodies. Now, here are the stipulations for regular priests. Leviticus 21:1. Yahweh said to Moses, "Speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, a priest shall not defile himself for the dead among his people, except for his relatives that are near to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother, or his virgin sister who is near to him who has had no husband. For her he may defile himself." It is necessary to understand the phrase, "the dead among his people," from verse 1. Who are his people? Well, that's the tribes of Israel, since it is all Israel that these priests serve Yahweh for. So all Israel is our people. Only for his personal family may he attend a funeral. May he go near their dead body. If a fellow priest dies, he cannot attend the funeral or go near the dead body. If a friend dies, he cannot attend the funeral or go near the dead body. So this dead among his people also applies to the Nazirite and the high priest, even though that wordage doesn't necessarily appear everywhere. Here are the Nazirite restrictions for the dead. Numbers 6:6. All the days that he separates himself to Yahweh, he shall not go near a dead body. He shall not make himself unclean for his father or for his mother, for his brother, for his sister, when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation he is holy to Yahweh. If any man dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles the head of his separation, then he shall shave his head in the day of his cleansing. On the seventh day he shall shave it. Notice that verses 7 and 9 describe or define what is said in verse 6 about what kind of dead body this is. Verse 7 prohibits a Nazirite to be in the presence of the dead body of his father, mother, brother, or sister. This is very much like the high priest. Unlike the regular priest who can be near their dead bodies, the Nazirite cannot. The Nazirite is not even allowed to be in the same tent or house where there is a dead person. The dead body, then, is a human dead body, not an animal carcass. Yahweh makes provision for the sudden death of a person who is with the Nazirite. He or she will observe the third or seventh day mikvahs, and the head will be shaved again on the seventh day, and then on the eighth day he or she will bring the required sacrifices. Well, this prohibition about the dead among his people will pertain to Samson also when he attacks the Philistines, who are not his people, and who Yahweh's Spirit comes upon him to cause him to fight and kill. Because in war, one does become unclean. But the Nazirite's prohibited uncleanness is for that of his father, mother, brother, or sister, or all the dead among his people. It is not for all dead bodies, because he might, like Samson, go to war. Nazirites are not forbidden to go to war. And here is what applies to warriors after the battle. Numbers 31:19. Encamp outside the camp for 7 days. Whoever has killed any person, and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, you and your captives. It is not a sin to become unclean. It is a sin to remain unclean when you have known that you're unclean. And so here are the high priest's restrictions. They're very much like the Nazirite. Leviticus 21:10 and 11. He who is the high priest, verse 11, must not go into any dead body or defile himself for his father or for his mother. So to go in to a dead body is referencing funerals. Priests, Nazirites, and high priests are not permitted to attend funerals. Usually, the body is held in the tent, the house, the funeral home, or somewhere enclosed for funeral rites. And here in Jordan, in modern times, if the person dies in the hospital, they take them from the hospital and put them in the ground right away. There's no taking the person to a mosque or a church, or, they just take them from the hospital and they put them in the ground. And if they die in the home, which has happened here on this farm, they don't take them and put them in the ground. They take them first to the hospital to have them declared dead, and then they go to the grave. So that's how this all happens. But to go into a dead body references funerals, anywhere that they may have held in those days the body that had died, the person that had died. A priest, a Nazirite, or high priest cannot attend any part of that funeral where the family would gather together and then take them out to the graveside service. None of that can be attended. But there is no animal for which humans do funerals, at least not in that time. In this crazy time, they do funerals for all kinds of things, I suppose even fish and insects. I don't know. The high priest restrictions I wrote here are more stringent than for a Nazirite or a regular priest, and I wrote that because it says that the high priest shall not defile himself for his father or his mother. But could be looked at the other way around, because the Nazirite's restrictions are father, mother, brother, sister. So however you want to look at that. The regular priest, though, can defile himself for the broader family, his wife's family and so forth. A Nazirite cannot defile himself or herself even for his or her father, mother, brother, or sister. And the high priest cannot defile himself for anyone, not even for his father or mother. So these Nazirite restrictions are not about the dead bodies of animals, as are often included in commentaries. Such a restriction against touching a dead animal would mean priests, Nazirites, and the high priest would be forbidden from slaughtering an animal for food. If they were restricted from slaughtering an animal for food, the priest, Nazirite, and high priest would be mentioned in Deuteronomy 12, where the instructions for slaughtering were given. Yahweh would needfully have had to make the 3 exceptions when he gave instructions for slaughtering for food, if the dead body restrictions applied also to animals. But Yahweh did not give that instruction. All Israelites become unclean until evening for touching a dead animal, according to Leviticus 11:8 and 24. That would include the priest, Nazirite, and the high priest. Yahweh did not intend the priests, Nazirites, and the high priest to be vegetarians. And it is not a sin to be unclean. It is only a sin when we know we are unclean and refuse or forget to mikvah. So Samson did not break his Nazirite vow when he killed the lion, nor did he break it when he touched the lion, the carcass on the, when he was getting the honey. He became unclean. Again, it is not a sin to become unclean. It is a sin to not mikvah afterward. Now let's talk about the honey that comes from animal carcasses. Did you know that there is a type of bee that only makes hives in animal carcasses? Well, some of you may have, but I didn't. They're called vulture bees. And that term, vulture bees, should begin to ring in your mind a prophecy. These bees are stingless bees, so if someone found honey in a carcass, one would become unclean for a day just to get it, but he wouldn't get stung. So the honey from the carcass of the lion prophesies about the sweet victory Yeshua got over Satan. Remember, the roaring lion is Satan. And Yeshua got that sweet victory over Satan and over death because life came and sweetness came out of the carcass. The bees, the life of the bees came and sweetness came out of that carcass. The bees prophesy further about the sweetness of the victory at the final war, Armageddon, when the vultures will eat the flesh of Yahweh's enemies. Matthew 24:28 and Luke 17:37 tell us about them. Both verses say, "For wherever the carcass is, that is where the vultures gather together." So you see there's a prophecy in this carcass, this lion carcass. Revelation 19:17 says, "I saw an angel standing in the sun. He cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in the sky, 'Come, be gathered together to the great supper of God, that you may eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of those who sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, small and great.'" But now here is where we come to a problem. Judges 14:9. "He came to his father and mother and gave to them the honey, and they ate. But he didn't tell them he had taken the honey out of the lion's body." Remember, it is not a sin to be unclean, but Samson knew he was unclean and would no doubt mikvah. But what about his parents? Leviticus 5:17 says, "If anyone sins and does any of the things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done, though he didn't know it, yet he is guilty and shall bear his iniquity." Yet Leviticus 4:27 says, "If any of the common people sins unwittingly," they didn't know, "in doing any of the things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done and is guilty, if his sin, which he has sinned, is made known to him, then he shall bring for his offering a goat, a female without defect, for his sin which he has sinned." Samson's parents were not aware of the sin that was on them the next day because they did not mikvah, because Samson did not tell them it came from an unclean source. And I speculated last week about why he would not necessarily have wanted to tell them about that incident with him killing the lion because, not that they would exploit him, but maybe they wouldn't, uh, they would have believed him, but then what if they told somebody about it and then it got rumors around, and you know how things go with people. I don't know if that's why he didn't say anything about it. Nonetheless, he caused his parents to sin. And Leviticus 5:1 says, "If anyone sins in that he hears the voice of adjuration, he being a witness, whether he has seen it or known it, or if he doesn't report it, then he shall bear his iniquity." Now, some people say that, the way that I just spoke that is questionable, and some people say that it's not questionable, that both things apply. You've been called to court and you are a witness, whether you've seen or known of what happened, or if he doesn't report it, then he shall bear his iniquity. So either way, if he doesn't talk about it in court, or if he sees and knows something and he doesn't report it as a sin that has happened in the community, that person bears his iniquity. So this verse applies both to being called to be a witness or knowing something that you don't report. Either way, Samson sinned in what he did to his parents. And this is where the paradoxical life of Samson begins. While he has remained true to the vow he was called to from before conception, he now begins to embody the deliberate sins of Israel, all the while that his life parallels Israel's Messiah, who must come to restore them back to the original covenant at Mount Sinai. Judges 14:10. His father went down to the woman, and Samson made a feast there, for the young men used to do so. So Samson's father went down to Timnah with Samson, preparing to get the Philistine worldly woman for his wife. Yeshua also went down from his throne in heaven to Mount Sinai. His father's spirit was with him, preparing to take Israel for his wife. There was a feast made by Yeshua with his father present at Mount Sinai, where the elders and Moses sat at Yahweh's table to eat and seal the marriage covenant they had just made with him. Likewise, there was a feast made by Samson with his father present. It was said that way in that scripture because it was the groom's responsibility to make the feast, not the father of the groom, which is one reason we know it was pre-incarnate Yeshua who the men saw. And by the way, if everything had worked out correctly in this wedding, the Philistine woman would have been going home with Samson to Samson's father's house, just as Yeshua's bride will go to be in his father's house. Judges 4:11. When they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. The Philistines brought the companions to guard Samson through intimidation. It seems they were against the marriage and did not trust the situation. Because, they had not yet seen Samson in action. They didn't really know him. He was in the city one day and he saw this woman. He wasn't introduced to her. These people didn't know who Samson was. So it was under this duress that Samson gave his riddle. Now, who do the 30 Philistine companions symbolize? They are the world's other gods. Yeshua was surrounded by doctrines of other gods when he was here. Some of the Jews worshipped Greek deities. Some worshipped Roman deities. The Jews knew who Beelzebub was, and it wasn't just from their history books that they knew about him. The problem with being surrounded by other gods is that their doctrines seep into religious doctrines like Judaism and Christianity. And so now we're going to talk about the riddle. Judges 14:12. Samson said to them, "Let me tell you a riddle now, but if you can't tell me the answer, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing." That's very important, those 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. And they said to him, "Tell us your riddle, that we may hear it." Let me give you a little spoiler alert. He asked them if they would participate, and they said yes, they would. They didn't have to participate. This is going to be important when we come to the understanding of this and what commentators say about it. And he said to them, here's the riddle. Out of the eater came food. Out of the strong came out sweetness. They couldn't in 3 days declare the riddle. Now, commentators accuse Samson of trying to deceive the Philistines with this riddle. I have read this over and over in the commentaries, and I can't believe they say it. They also say it indicates his arrogance. Answering riddles was a form of entertainment in those days. Was Samson's riddle one that could not be answered? Not necessarily. I'll show you why. Was he arrogant or trying to make friends of his companions? Was the riddle really unknowable? Well, let's answer that last question first. Riddles are games, especially in those days. Friends and foes alike play games with each other. We do it today. We don't play riddle games. We play competitive sports. But King Solomon and King Hiram are historically known to have played this riddle game, sending riddles to each other by messenger for many, many years. It's entertainment for them. So let me jump to the conclusion. It turns out that Samson's companions were actually the ones trying to deceive, because they knew they could not afford 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing. They already knew that. But they weren't going to back down. Even before the riddle was spoken, if they had been honest men, they would have said, "Oh, the price is too high." But they did not, because it was they who were arrogant, not Samson. And furthermore, another spoiler alert, they had to cheat to get the answer. So rather than just paying the price for losing, they cheated. Samson did not cheat, nor did he deceive, nor was he arrogant. He was trying to engage them in entertainment, whether he regarded them as friends or foes. There were lions in Israel in those days, and lions were eaters of men. We have lions mentioned throughout the scriptures. So all they needed to do was think about who was the strongest eater that stalked in their wilderness. Honey was a great prize when you found it, and it is sweet. In fact, honey is sweeter than dates. And look, if you find honey in a lion carcass, you're not going to get stung. But if you find honey in a tree, you're going to fight those bees. So the answer might not have made sense to them, but a strong eater and something sweet were common things in Israel at that time, even in their territory. So it was not impossible for someone to put the two pieces together to come up with lion and honey, even though they don't understand it. The problem was that they were bent on understanding what it meant. They couldn't just answer, what is a lion and what is honey? You see? A parallel to Yeshua is that he spoke in parables, which are much like riddles. He spoke in parables excuse me, to fulfill Isaiah's prophecy, which, by the way, Yeshua had given to Isaiah. But parables are really a spiritual riddle. They make you have to dive deeper than what your spirit is willing to if you're not interested really in diving deep into spiritual things. Samson spoke in his riddle. Yeshua spoke in parables. Why did Yeshua speak in parables? Matthew 13:10. The disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered them, "To you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but it is not given to them. For whoever has, to him will be given, and he will have abundance. But whoever doesn't have, from him will be taken away even that which he has." Sorry about the throat clearing, people. I don't know why it's doing that. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because seeing they don't see, and hearing they don't hear, neither do they understand. Do you see that this was the problem of Samson's 30 companions? Matthew 13:14. In them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, "By hearing you will hear and will in no way understand. Seeing you will see and will in no way perceive. For this people's heart has grown callous. Their ears are dull of hearing. They have closed their eyes, or else perhaps they might perceive with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their heart, and would turn again, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For most certainly I tell you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see the things which you see, and didn't see them, and to hear the things which you hear, and didn't hear them." So the parables are designed to challenge our understanding. Did Yeshua deceive people? No. The people deceived themselves by refusing to look beyond their worldly and religious doctrines. Once we relinquish the world and religion to come to Yahweh in His kingdom, we then begin to understand Yeshua's parables, don't we? Yeshua also said the religious leaders could not understand him because their father was the devil, Samson's lion. John 8:42. Therefore Yeshua said to them, the religious men, "If God were your father, you would love me, for I came out and have come from God, for I haven't come of myself, but He sent me. Why don't you understand my speech? Because you can't hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning, and doesn't stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks on his own, for he is a liar and the father of lies." Well, that describes those 30 companions of Samson. Samson's riddle paralleled Yeshua's parables. Samson's companions were enemies used by the Philistines to intimidate and guard him because they did not trust him. They had become friends, or had they become friends with Samson, which, groomsmen are supposed to be like Yeshua's disciples. This would not have been used by them as a way to cheat Samson. So either get the answer or admit defeat. Those companions of his were not willing to. His companions were the ones who cheated, not Samson. Furthermore, if the companions had understood the riddle, they would have known who Samson was, a man filled with Yahweh's Spirit. If the religious leaders had understood Yeshua's parables, they would have known who Yeshua is, Yahweh, who gives his Spirit to all who believe in him. Now let's discuss that 30 linen garments and the 30 changes of clothing. People focus on that number 30, and I got to tell you, go look it up online. You'll get 10 different answers of what that number means. The changes of clothing, though, are not about the number 30. This is not a gematria challenge. Rather, the changes of clothing are about those who will get improper, about those who will either wash their garments in the blood of the Lamb and enter the kingdom, or those who will get improper garments and they will be cast out of the wedding feast. With the garments, Samson offered those worldly Philistine companions the chance to know him and to get their new garments as a gift from him. The same goes for Yeshua, who offers the world the chance to know him so he can give them new garments which they will wash in his blood. Isaiah 61:10. I will greatly rejoice in Yahweh. My soul will be joyful in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with the robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with a garland, and as a bride adorns herself with jewels. Revelation 7:14. This is when John is being confronted by a man who's asked him, "Who are these?" in the vision, and he said, "I told him, my Lord, you know," because John apparently didn't know. And he said to me, "These are those who came out of the great tribulation. They washed their robes and made them white in the Lamb's blood." But we first must seek, find, and enter the kingdom while we yet live in order to get our new garments. So let's talk about them not being able to answer the riddle by the third day. Yahweh's people were supposed to have understood things that they could not because of their spiritual state. That's why we have Samson. That's why, when he sins, he's reflecting the spiritual state of Israel. And Samson and his riddle reflect this state. And the third day is the third millennium, prophetically. Yeshua arrived at the beginning of the fourth millennium because his people still did not understand the instructions, the, quote, riddle of the law, unquote, which came to them through Moses at Mount Sinai. So now let's see the arrogant companions' plan. Rather than admit defeat, they will cheat. Judges 14:15. On the seventh day, they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband that he may declare to us the riddle, lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you called us to impoverish us? Isn't that so? Haven't you, O worldly wife, called us to be gods alongside Samson/Yeshua in order to impoverish us?" It's always about the money, isn't it? So what was the companion's plan? Kill the worldly wife on the seventh day, or, in the seventh millennium, who dared to even have any kind of relationship with Samson or with Yeshua. The companions know nothing of Samson or Yeshua, and neither does the wife who is in the world. Yet it will be she whom they will burn. We call this the Great Tribulation. It isn't Yahweh who brings this. It is the world who brings it. Yeshua will come to rescue his true bride who does know him and understands his ways, unlike the worldly wife who doesn't, and to prevent all of his creation from total annihilation. And the way that Yeshua begins to rescue his people is with all those bowls, trumpets, and woes, and all of those events that he brings, but that's in response to what the world does, you see. On the seventh day they said to Samson, "Get the secret of this riddle for us, so we won't owe the purchase of garments for this bet." And that's what the world does. The world cheats its way into victory, and they do it by enticing Samson's and Yeshua's wife to betray them. Remembering that Samson's life symbolized the poor state of Israel's relationship with Yahweh from the beginning, from Mount Sinai, Samson's wedding is significant for our understanding, because it also prophesies about what will happen to Yahweh's people in the future. Yeshua used weddings as prophecy. Samson's wedding was a wedding prophecy in action. Yeshua had parables about weddings. Here is one of his parables, Matthew 25:1. "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. Those who were foolish when they took their lamps took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom delayed, they all slumbered and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Behold, the bridegroom is coming! Come out to meet him!' Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'What if there isn't enough for us and you? You go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves.' While they went away to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins also came, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he answered, 'Most certainly I tell you, I don't know you. Watch therefore, for you don't know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming.' So who are the wise virgins? It's those people who know Yeshua, Yahweh, and they get him. They understand him. Who are the foolish virgins? Those people who know about Yeshua, but they don't really get him. They don't really understand him because they gambled with their oil. They didn't really seek to get more oil from the Holy Spirit. And they played around with other companions, other gods. They did not prepare themselves for him by getting to know him, just as Samson's Philistine wife had not spent time trying to get to know him. As Samson's betrothed, she had the right to ask her father to contact Samson so they could get to know each other. But she had not done that. And by the way, all the way down here to modern times, that's how it is. The young man goes with the father and the mother, and the father, the women are off somewhere else together while this is all going on. They make the deal, they're going to be married. He now has the right to talk with her, and she has the right to talk with him, albeit in the presence of a father or brother. Samson was always in pursuit of her, but she never pursued him. Yeshua has always been in pursuit of a pure wife for himself, but his wife historically, in ancient Israel, never pursued him. In the world, the wedding is all about the bride and nothing about the groom. But in the kingdom, the wedding is all about the groom, with the bride being the one who must learn to conform to him before they are married. This takes Holy Spirit oil, which is lacking in those believers who remain at arm's length from Yeshua in the world, playing with companions/gods, just like Samson's bride had done to Samson, playing with his companions. Because the men could not understand the riddle, they decided to steal it from Samson through his wife. This is like the thief who tried to enter Yahweh's kingdom by climbing over the wall, or sneaking through the back door, or climbing through a window. Yeshua said in John 10:1, "Most certainly I tell you, one who does not enter by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber." Guess who was a thief and a robber? A cheat. It wasn't Samson, like the commentators say. It was those companions. Judges 14:16. Samson's wife wept before him and said, "You just hate me and don't love me." Well, that sounds like the Israelites in the wilderness after they'd been brought up out of Egypt to go to their wedding. She sniveled and whined to get her way instead of standing with her man. She's already betrayed him. Exodus 16:3 says the children of Israel said to them, "We wish we had died by Yahweh's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots, when we ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Exodus 17:3. The people were thirsty for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, "Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst?" Exodus 21:14. If a man schemes and comes presumptuously on his neighbor to kill him, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. I don't know how that and the next one got in there, so I'll take them out. Judges 14:16 says, "You've told a riddle to the children of my people, and you have not told it to me." So she's complaining instead of standing with him. What she wants is, Samson's answer to the secret riddle, but she doesn't want Samson himself. Somewhere in my study, it occurred to me, and others think so too, that Samson's family was wealthy. He could afford to have a big wedding in a remote location from where they lived, and he could offer to pay, if the garments and the changes of clothing and all of that. He could do that. And he could make this big feast with all these people present. And in fact, the number 30 is often associated with various kinds of wealth. I dare to say this woman knew she was marrying a wealthy man. It was his money she wanted. She didn't want Samson. Judges 14:16. He said to her, "Behold, I haven't told my father or my mother, so why should I tell you?" She wept before him the whole 7 days while their feast lasted. And on the seventh day he told her, because she pressed him severely, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. Here's Samson. What does he do? He trusted his wife, and she cheated him. Samson was cheated by the Philistine companions, hired by the bride's father and by the bride, but paid for probably by Samson. We have read how the Israelites sniveled in the wilderness, acting like petulant children instead of mature adults with a relationship with Yahweh. And then we see how they cheated on Yahweh with the golden calf. The world seeks to get Yahweh's secrets while still staying in the world, to be governed by Satan instead of Yahweh. In fact, this really is Satan's espionage attempt, isn't it? That's what his wife was doing. She was doing espionage for those companions. Satan wants those secrets so he can use them against Yeshua. That's why Yahweh does not reveal all the details of his plans in Scripture, and that's why we have to do a lot of study. Judges 14:18. The men of the city said to him on the seventh day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" But he said to them, "If you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have found out my riddle." To plow with my heifer is a reference to adultery. Samuel, the author of Judges, did not say Samson's wife had been unfaithful to him in body, but she certainly had been unfaithful to him in spirit. In other words, she had committed idolatry against Samson, as Israel committed idolatry against Yeshua. And that seventh day is a prophetic reference to the seventh millennium, when, by the end, and before the millennium ends, before the sun goes down on that millennium, the wicked religious ones who still refuse to enter into Yeshua's kingdom will think they've got it all figured out now. And they'll think that, they now have all the answers, all the secrets. The New World Order elites of today think they've figured out the riddle of creation, how to hack humans so they can steal Yahweh's creation to become gods themselves. There will be people like these that make it into the millennial kingdom among the nations over whom Yeshua rules and reigns. Thus, there will be one last war perpetrated by those who still don't get it because they don't want a relationship with Yeshua. They will have spent the millennium without temptation from their father, Satan, because he will have been bound away from them in the pit, so they won't be able to blame Satan for their wickedness. They'll have to admit their wickedness comes from their flesh. But Satan will be released at the end of the millennium, and he will show them a plan to defeat Yeshua. Because, he will have spent 1,000 years of uninterrupted time thinking about this, while his woman, his whore, sits enjoying the fruits of Yeshua's kingdom and is plotting to destroy it. Hello? But it won't work. Here's why. Judges 14:19. Yahweh's Spirit came on mightily on him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck 30 men of them and took their plunder, then gave the changes of clothing to those who declared the riddle. His anger burned, and he went up to his father's house. By the way, I don't have it here in the script, but he didn't consummate the marriage with this wedding with this woman that he married. He just went to Ashkelon, got what was supposed to be gotten, and went back home. Now we can speculate all day why Samson went to Ashkelon. Yahweh alone knows why it was Ashkelon who bore the brunt of Samson's anger, because it was only when Yahweh's Spirit came on him that he went there. Now, some speculate it was for anonymity. Timnah was far away from Ashkelon. Samson chose a different part of the Philistine world to attack. It was a place from where he took the plunder of dead men's garments, the kind of garments people will get if they decide to not be part of Yeshua's kingdom. Samson did not break his Nazirite vow here either. The men he killed were not the dead of his people. Judges 14:20. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his friend. This is the first time we read about any companion being a friend. Who was the companion that had been Samson's friend? Well, we don't know. Who was the companion that was Yeshua's friend who also got his wife? Who got Yeshua's wife? Adam. Yeshua had been Adam's companion in the garden. All mankind went the way of Adam. He represents the world as an antithesis to Yeshua. Yeshua lost his wife at the golden calf when she cheated on him, and what a fall that was, too. It was one from which ancient Israel never recovered. We can now see how the Nazirite Samson and the man Samson are paradoxes in one body. The Nazirite is the Messiah part of Samson, while the man Samson is the sinning part, the part that embodies Israel's spiritual condition. Samson did not break his Nazirite vow by killing the lion nor eating honey from it, but he did sin against his parents. Israel sinned against their Father in heaven, and are still doing so to this day. And that ends this teaching.